Pranam, everyone. Auromira Centre, London, is delighted to welcome you all to Sri Aurobindo's sesquicentenary celebrations. We extend our warm welcome to Debashish Ji, our esteemed speaker for today's session, the second in this series. Debashish Ji will be talking to us on Isha Upanishad in the light of Sri Aurobindo. Dr. Debashish Banerji is the Haridas Chaudhary Professor of Indian Philosophies and Cultures and the Doshi Professor of Asian Art at the California Institute of Integral Studies, San Francisco. From 1991 to 2006, Debashish Ji served as the president of the East-West Cultural Center in Los Angeles, an institution that introduced Indian philosophy and culture, including the work of Sri Aurobindo, from a scholarly perspective to American audiences. He has authored and edited several books on major figures of the Bengal Renaissance, such as the artist Abanindranath Tagore, the poet Rabindranath Tagore, and the yogi philosopher Sri Aurobindo, as well as on critical post-humanism, integral yoga psychology, and a variety of creative and art-related projects. His most recent books are meditations on the Isha Upanishad, tracing the philosophical vision of Sri Aurobindo, the books published by Sri Aurobindo Samiti and Mahabodhi Publishers 2019, and Integral Yoga Psychology, Metaphysics and Transformation as Taught by Sri Aurobindo, published by Lotus Press in 2020. Sri Aurobindo's commentary on the Veda has been momentous in bringing out the rahasya, the secret of the Veda, which was misinterpreted by the Western philosophers and philologists such as Max Muller. The Upanishads, and particularly Isha Upanishad, is arguably has had the most diverse interpretations and commentaries by various Vedantic scholars. Sri Aurobindo's translation and analysis of the Isha Upanishad was published in 1914 to 1915 in Arya, and it is available in the complete works of Sri Aurobindo, volume 17. We welcome Debashish Ji here to illumine us on Isha Upanishad. And I'm not sure if it is the very early morning time for you, which is, I'm not sure if you are in the US. No. Okay. So you're in India. Okay.
India.
Okay. I was going to say, otherwise it would have been the Brahma Muhurta, which would be the perfect time for meditation. But in any case, we can meditate at this lovely time, afternoon for yourself, and yes, early afternoon for us too. So very warm welcome to you, and please take over. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Sushma ji and Sanjeev ji. I have such fond memories of your center and Vijay Manik, with whom I spent lovely hours many years back in London when he invited me to come to your center. So it's a special honor and special joy for me to talk to all of you at the Auromira Centre in London on the subject of the Isha Upanishad in the light of Sri Aurobindo's interpretation. So, as pointed out by Sushma Shrestha, the Isha Upanishad is one of the most diversely interpreted Upanishads. Now, the Upanishads themselves come to us in a time period that follows the Veda. She mentioned the Rig Veda. So it follows the Veda. And if we are to use mainstream chronology, I'd say it comes to us sometime between the 8th century BCE and the 2nd century BCE. It isn't one of the earliest Upanishads. It's a slightly late Upanishad, according to mainstream chronology. We come to this surmise for a number of reasons. One of them being that it's in poetry. It's a very mature Upanishad. The literary genre of the Upanishads has reached maturity at this point. And we find this in a very chiseled form of poetry. So it's a highly sophisticated piece of literary work that comes to us. Secondly, this work has a tremendous impact on the Bhagavad Gita. So if we are to look at the Bhagavad Gita, which thinks of itself as an Upanishad, of course, we don't consider it an Upanishad, but it's a Vedantic work. It's a work that presents itself as a kind of Upanishad. It is very deeply influenced by two Upanishads, one of them being the Isha Upanishad and the other the Katha Upanishad. So it is likely that these Upanishads belong to a time window close to that of the composition of the Gita. And we can't be absolutely sure of that, but at least at present, our mainstream chronology puts the Gita at around between 2nd century BC and the turn of the millennium. So it's somewhere around that time that we get this text. So we may ask the question which arises almost immediately: is it before the earliest Buddhist texts or not? Is it assuming the Buddhist texts or not? I will not go into that question. It's a very fraught question. We cannot be sure. But there are reasons to believe that it may be actually quite aware of the approach of Buddhism to the subject that it takes up. Now, it's a short Upanishad. Upanishads are varying in size. The earliest Upanishads, the Brihadaranyaka and the Chandogya Upanishads, are very large. And after that, so in other words, those earliest Upanishads are more like compilations of this genre from materials that have been gathered in that vein of writing, or rather of speaking, because nothing was written at that time. All this was oral literature. But later Upanishads are smaller. And by the time we come to the Isha Upanishad, there seems to be a trend to give us very concentrated doses of knowledge in these texts called the Upanishads. So the Isha Upanishad is made up of 18 verses, 18 short verses. So it's a short Upanishad from that point of view. And it's extremely condensed. It's very precise. What it wants to say is conveyed in a tremendous economy of phrasing. It also is very mystical and enigmatic. Sri Aurobindo points out that the method of the Upanishads as a literary genre proceeds from intuition to intuition. So it isn't as if we are being given a logical set of propositions as in formal philosophy of the later periods, but we are being given these very, very short, incisive things that will open up a certain vision in us. So this is the way in which the Isha Upanishad is presented. Sri Aurobindo began engaging with this Upanishad very early in his coming into contact with Indian spiritual or philosophical literature. His earliest, the longest engagement as a interpreter and translator with any Upanishad for Sri Aurobindo is with this one. In other words, it preoccupied him for a very long time. The earliest writings that we find that he makes of this Upanishad go back to the period in Baroda, just after he came back from England. And then he sporadically kept engaging with this. And as Sushma ji pointed out, the final version that we look at in the collected works, of course, that volume or tome called Isha Upanishad in the collected works contains all his existing uh, writing on the Isha Upanishad. But the final version that we come across in part one of that book comes to us from 1914-15. So that's around 1914 when the Arya was first begun after the visit of Paul Richard and the mother, Mira Richard, to Pondicherry, and after they proposed the starting of the Arya to Sri Aurobindo. So if we look back just before that period, in 1914, when he wrote this final, also very chiseled, beautiful interpretation, commentary on the Isha Upanishad, we find that he wraps up an unfinished commentary on the Isha Upanishad and decides to move on to this new version. And that commentary that he wrapped up just a little before, maybe just a year before, was the third of a series of attempts that he titled The Life Divine. So here Sri Aurobindo, writing an interpretation or commentary on the Isha Upanishad called The Life Divine, that he takes three stabs at, the last one being around a little before 1914 or perhaps in 1914. And then he decides to abandon that particular approach and launches on the commentary that we are familiar with called Isha Upanishad. And at the same time, launches on a major work, which is today considered his magnum opus in philosophy, called The Life Divine. So just this fact should make us aware of how important the Isha Upanishad was to Sri Aurobindo's vision and spiritual mission, if you want to call it that. So something must be there in this little 18 stanza Upanishad that really had a very strong impact on Sri Aurobindo. And we can ask that question, what is it? What is there something there in this little thing that he saw as having so much importance that he gave his commentary the name that he ultimately reserved for his magnum opus? Yes, that something is supermind. The central idea behind the entire teaching of Sri Aurobindo. Supermind, though the word in the Upanishads that Sri Aurobindo identifies for this term is actually not used in this Upanishad. It is used in a slightly modified form. It is not used in the form in which it occurs in some of the other Upanishads, but it is present in a slightly modified form, and it is present in idea throughout. The term I'm referring to is the term Vijnana, and we'll see how and where that term occurs. So this notion, instead of trying to complicate matters for those who have not heard the term supermind, is something in other terms or words Sri Aurobindo has also called integral. if we think of it as a consciousness, it's a kind of consciousness that he calls the integral consciousness. So Isha Upanishad is a 18 stanzas text that, according to Sri Aurobindo, is centralizing its aim at the integral consciousness. What is the integral consciousness? Maybe I will touch on that before we launch into actually looking at what is the Isha Upanishad saying. Just to give you a introduction or a little entry point to this idea that can be very easily missed and has been easily missed, because obviously if there are so many interpretations, it has been most diversely interpreted. It is an idea that hasn't been caught by many people, most people, perhaps all people before Sri Aurobindo's commentary. So, integral consciousness, let's look at the properties of integral consciousness. I will name a few of its properties, and then we can get an idea, because these things are not things that can be defined uh, in terms that you catch immediately. We have to look at it from many sides to get the fullness of its weight or import. Integral consciousness is one and infinite at the same time. It's the only thing there is that is absolutely one, and it is radically infinite. It is totally infinite, so infinite that nothing can contain it. So it's these two at the same time. Secondly, integral consciousness is something that can never be diminished, however much we take away from it. And as a corollary, whatever we take from it will remain the integral consciousness. So these are, we will see, these properties are fielded in the preamble to the Isha Upanishad itself. Thirdly, integral consciousness is something that is in all things and that all things are in. See, this is going to be actually a specific clause in this Upanishad itself, that it contains all things, and everything that it contains it. See, this is a recursive definition. Finally, integral consciousness is something which has a law of unfoldment that is what in today's terms we'll call fractal. In other words, every particle in it is following that same law of unfoldment. The law of unfoldment is something known to all in the each and to each in the all. See, so these are some of the properties of integral consciousness, and it may seem enigmatic when I put it like this, but I'm introducing it so that you may keep these properties in mind as we are considering this Upanishad. These ideas became central to Sri Aurobindo because they answered exactly the kind of problem he was trying to solve spiritually. This is the one kind of consciousness that for Sri Aurobindo offers us a certain kind of redemption to a divine life on earth, outside from our present condition, which is a condition of suffering. Now, I say condition of suffering. So even this notion of the condition of suffering is something which is very prevalent at the time of the composition of the Isha Upanishad. And here I come back to what I mentioned about Buddhism and the Buddha. So, as you know, the entire philosophy of the Buddha is framed around the issue of suffering. And some people translate his first tenet of the four what are called noble truths as all life is suffering. Actually, it isn't all life is suffering. It is just the truth of suffering. That is what the first of his four noble truths is, the truth of suffering. Now, suffering for the Buddha arises due to the experience of time. Now, I won't go into all the details of it, but we can see that right from the outset, the experience of time. Everything passes away. We can't retain anything. At the same time, we are made to want to have things that last and that stay forever. This constitution of our experience brings suffering. This is the basis of the suffering that Buddha is talking about. Now, we may actually analyze it a little further and say there are two roots of suffering that we have of this kind. One is exactly this, the suffering that we experience due to time. And we'll see that in a little more detail soon. But the other is the suffering that we experience due to multiplicity. It is what may be called the law of separation that we experience. We experience ourselves in a world in which we live along with others. So we live along with many other people. It's a diverse world. Other humans, other non-humans, other non-living realities, beings, things, entities. Now, all these so-called multiple entities and beings share space and time with us. And so, in a way, we find that whatever we want to have, there's going to be something or someone else that's pressing us to take it away from us. See? So this unfortunate, if you want to look at it from that point of view, or at least uncomfortable life of rubbing shoulders with others that we may not be so pleased about, is an inevitable reality of our existence as separate beings. That is one of the roots of suffering for us. The other root of suffering is time, as I just mentioned. It is the fact that nothing remains. If I try to hold on to something, it will go away. I myself will not remain. And I experience that from day to day in the fact that our experience of time is always bounded by events that come and go. The day itself starts in a certain way and ends with night. There are seasons, and all around us, things are born and die. And at the same time, we experience life in terms of expectations, happenings that seem to be bounded in time. When we look back, we have memories of various things that have occupy a certain amount of time. Time experience is discrete. And each of these experiences in time also has a shade of unhappiness or sorrow to it, however happy it is, because it passed away. Now, if it's an unhappy experience, perhaps we may think that the fact that it passed away should make us happy. Well, it does from the viewpoint of relief, but somewhere we are unhappy about the fact of impermanence and transience. It's a chronic kind of suffering. So what do we do with this? This leads to a certain kind of anxiety in life. Existentialist philosophers have called this angst. We are always pushed by a certain kind of anxiety due to these two kinds of pressures, the pressures of others and the pressures of time, at the most fundamental level of our experience. And so our response to this may be varied, but the most prominent life response to this kind of anxiety is to grab what we can. There is always this sense that I have to catch it before it disappears, before somebody else grabs it, or before time grabs it and it's gone. This kind of a constrained life of being rushed by wanting to hold on to something is something which really brings the basis the basis of unhappiness in our lives. Isha Upanishad is going to start by addressing this very notion of experience, but it doesn't start by addressing it in terms of lack. It starts by telling us that this is actually not the truth of your being. The truth of your being is integral. And it is integral because this kind of experience that we are having of feeling, you know, feeling um, rushed or pushed by multiplicity and temporality, impermanence, is a surface experience. Ultimately, all the experiences that all of us are having are being had by only one being. That being is the integral being. So, this is the central point of the Isha Upanishad. And in a variety of ways, it is saying to us, let us remember that, let us put our focus on that, let us move away from the wrong perception with which we are pushed into the world, and let us practice life in a certain way, a way of life practice, lifestyle practice that will bring us into contact with this truth that resides in us. As I said right at the beginning, the property of the integral consciousness, that it is in all of us and all of us are in it. Our essence is the integral consciousness, and it already knows what everything else is doing, because that is what unfolds the law, the fractal law of the entire cosmos. See? So, this is the preamble, so to say, to understanding the Isha Upanishad. Now, how does the Isha Upanishad unfold? Now, there is a preamble, a verse preamble to the Isha Upanishad. In Sri Aurobindo's interpretation, it starts with his translation. Those of you who have looked at that text will see that it starts with the first stanza of the Isha Upanishad. All this is for the habitation of the Lord. Isha Vasyam Idam Sarvam Yat Kincha Jagatyam Jagat Tena Tyaktena Bhunjitha Ma Gridha Kasya Svidhanam. Even in this very pithy short sentence, a lot of what I just mentioned, all of it is encapsulated. From a certain point of view, the whole Isha Upanishad, again, is following the fractal law of development of the integral consciousness. All of it is contained right in the beginning, in the very first verse. And we'll look at that first verse in a moment. But this commentary or this translation by Sri Aurobindo gives us the actual body of the Isha Upanishad. However, the Isha Upanishad begins with a preamble of one more verse that goes before it. This verse comes from the past, in historically speaking, uh, for the Isha Upanishad. It comes from the earliest Upanishad, the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad. And this verse goes, Purnam adah Purnam idam Purnat Purnam udachyate Purnasya Purnam adaya Purnam eva vashishyate. So you'll notice this repetition of the word Purna. Purna, what is Purna? Well, if I connect it to all that I've been saying, I will say Purna means integral. Purna, in more commonly, means that which is full, the whole, the whole, that which is the only thing there is. It is complete, it is whole. So this stanza is saying that Purnam Adha, that is the whole. Purnam Idam, this is the whole. In other words, it is pointing to instances of the multiplicity of the world that we were talking about, that the world is made up of multiple things. That thing there is the whole. This thing here is the whole. Purnat Purnam Udachyate. From the whole emerges. Purnasya Purnamadaya, if we remove the whole from the whole, it is only the whole that remains. So this paradox, this is intuitive speech of the Upanishads. It begins, that's why the Isha Upanishad is such a paradoxical text. It begins with a preamble, which is itself the central paradox of the integral. And it presents it to us as a contemplative notion. It tells us, even before you start reading this book, contemplate this paradox. Contemplate this paradox. We are going to talk about something which is entire and whole in every instance of the universe. It is that which gives birth to things that come out of it, which are parts of it, which are no less than all of it. And in coming out from it, what remains is all of it. Sri Aurobindo has used a term for this in The Life Divine. He calls it the logic of the infinite. The logic of the infinite. The logic of the infinite is another kind of mathematics than the logic or mathematics of the finite. And to enter into the integral, we need to contemplate the logic of the infinite, because our normal habitual experience is the experience of the finite. But the integral that dwells in all of us is infinite. So there is somewhere in us where the meeting of the finite and the infinite takes place, and something in us that transcends the understanding of the finite and experiences the logic of the infinite. And that's what we are being invited to contemplate in this preamble. So coming from this preamble, if we start with this preamble, we enter into the actual 18 verses of the Isha Upanishad. Sri Aurobindo has done us a wonderful service in looking at the body of these 18 verses as having a certain kind of structure. a structure of, one may even call it a rhetorical structure, a structure that invites us to engage with it differently in different parts of it. So there are, according to him, 4 parts to these 18 verses. And we can look at this. So I think it'll be good to look at, just run through quickly those 18 verses in terms of the 4 parts before honing in on it. So these 4 parts, and for those who are not familiar with the Sanskrit, and also keeping time in mind, I will just read Sri Aurobindo's translation for now. And in specific parts, when we discuss it, I may bring your attention to specific Sanskrit portions. So the first part, according to Sri Aurobindo, is just the first 3 stanzas. And they go, all this is for habitation by the Lord, whatsoever is individual universe of movement in the universal movement. Already we see that it's not an easy sentence, but bear with me, just listen to it, and we'll think about it a little more as we continue. All this is for habitation by the Lord, whatsoever is individual universe of movement in the universal motion. By that renounced, thou shouldst enjoy. Lust not after any man's possession. Second, doing verily works in the world, one should wish to live 100 years. Thus it is in thee, and not otherwise than this. Action cleaves not to a man. Third, sunless are those worlds, and enveloped in blind gloom, whereto all they in their passing hence resort, who are slayers of their souls. This is, you may say, section 1. Just these 3 sentences or verses, couplets, constitute section 1. Then we have a jump to another set of ideas and another kind of speech, another kind of rhetorical engagement. The 4th stanza. One unmoving that is swifter than mind, that the gods reach not, for it progresses ever in front. That standing passes beyond others as they run. In that the master of life establishes the waters. You immediately we've taken a deep dive into dark waters. I mean, after the first 3, you suddenly enter into this deep paradox. It's just, if we thought that the first preamble was a paradox, the 4th stanza just takes us into the very deep woods of the world of paradox. Then we go on the same vein with number 5. That moves and that moves not. That is far and the same is near. That is within all this, and that also is outside all this. Number 6. But he who sees everywhere the self in all existences, and all existences in the self, shrinks not thereafter from aught. Number 7. He in whom it is the self-being that has become all existences that are becomings. For he has the perfect knowledge. How shall he be deluded? Whence shall he have grief? who sees everywhere oneness. Number 8, it is he that has gone abroad, that which is bright, bodiless, without scar of imperfection, without sinews, pure, unpierced by evil. The seer, the thinker, the one who becomes everywhere, the self existent, has ordered objects perfectly according to their nature from years sempiternal. This concludes the second part of the Isha Upanishad, a part that really plunges us into deep contemplation of paradox. Then we move to the third part, which is also enigmatic, very mystical, but not so paradoxical. It is again going back to a type of statement which is a more like a injunction. It's telling us something either to do or to understand. Number 9, into a blind darkness they enter who follow after the ignorance. They, as if into a greater darkness, who devote themselves to the knowledge alone. Other, verily, it is said, is that which comes by the knowledge. Other, that which comes by the ignorance. This is the lore we have received from the wise who revealed that to our understanding. He who knows that as both in one, the knowledge and the ignorance, by the knowledge crosses beyond death, and by the knowledge enjoys immortality. And then 12, 13, and 14 repeat a very, very similar kind of verse, with knowledge and ignorance replaced by the non-birth and the birth. Into a blind darkness they enter who follow after the non-birth. They, as if into a greater darkness, who devote themselves to the birth alone. And then the same kind of statement with 13 and 14. And that concludes the third part of this Upanishad. Then we come to the fourth part. Here, the language again changes, and we get a mystical language that comes close to the Veda. In other words, we start actually receiving the symbols of the Veda. The Isha Upanishad shows itself to be akin to the Veda, the Rig Veda. The face of truth is covered with a brilliant golden lid. That do thou remove, O fosterer, for the law of the truth for sight. O fosterer, O soul seer, O ordainer, O illumining sun, O power of the Father of creatures, marshal thy rays, draw together thy light, the lustre which is the most blessed form of all, that in thee I behold. The Purusha, there and there, he am I. This is suddenly a world of revelation. It's just like in the preamble, this is the whole, that is the whole, etc. Here, there is a certain kind of indicating of everything around as having become that truth that they're talking about, this, the being, the Lord, the person, Purusha, etc. The breath of things is an immortal life, but of this body ashes are the end. Om, O will, remember. That which was done, remember. O will, remember. That which was done, remember. Finally, the last stanza, O God, Agni, knowing all things that are manifested, lead us by the good path to the felicity, remove from us the devious attraction of sin. To thee, completest speech of submission, we would dispose. Now, since we are running close to the end of our period, I will point to these four sections to bring you the sense of what is going on in these four sections, the difference between the four sections. The first section is short, but already we see that a number of paradoxes are being fielded, at least of contradictions are being fielded. And if you paid a little attention to how I was presenting at first, our normal experience of life, you'll see that that is what is being addressed. That everything is moving in the universe. Every individual, we have a world of particles, we have a world uh, of diversity, but it is not a static diversity. So these are both those elements, the elements of multiplicity and of temporality are being addressed from the very beginning. Everything is moving. You have individual universes of movement and you have a universal motion. And each one of these is separate. But in everything, at the heart of everything, to inhabit everything, is the Lord. Now, this term Lord is the English translation for Isha, which is what gives its name to this Upanishad. And Isha, the reason it's being called Lord, is the Sanskrit term from the very root sense that has to do with will. In other words, what is the will that controls all the movement of the universe? That is the will of the law of truth, the law of the idea with a capital I, which is the one law controlling everything. This term is going to become the word dharma in the Mahabharata and Gita. There is one law which is at the center of everything. We cannot see it. It's invisible to us. We can't even put it down in writing. As soon as we put it in a law book, we've lost it. But we can experience it because that is the law of the one will that is unfolding, that is becoming in the universe. So that is how it begins as a statement. It is just giving us the statement. And then the second statement is a life affirming statement. It is not telling us we have to get away from life. It is telling us we have to live life with the fullness of our energy, wishing to live 100 years. And it is giving the aim of life as enjoyment. But from where is the enjoyment going to come? Not from greed. That, remember, we were talking about the fact that our anxiety makes us grab at things. But if we were to renounce that sense of grabbing, and if we were to put our focus on the intuition that the Lord of all things lives in us, then we would live a life in which that one law would determine every incident of our life. And that renunciation, that surrender, would bring us enjoyment. That is the enjoyment that this Upanishad is all about. And then it gives a caveat to the notion of action that can be conducted without any consequence because it is not conducted by the ego. It's conducted by the one law that knows what is the right thing to be done, what is called kartavyam karma or karyam karma in the Gita. And the caveat is, that's why it says over there in the second stanza, it says, action cleaves not to a man. But the caveat is, if we don't understand that, and if we live our life grabbing at things, then we are slayers of the soul. and we enter into a world that is further and further away from the light, the solar light of the center. See, that's where the sunless, and we see that the sun returns right at the end in the fourth section. The sun is the Lord. The sun is the symbol of the integral. The sun is the supermind. So that's how we connect this. From the second section, the very paradoxical section, is all about the the relationship between this Lord and the laws of the world, the laws of the fragmented world. So the gods, who are the gods? The gods are the functionaries that keep the law of the universe. So they are operating at a certain kind of, you know, temporality. They have their own types of works to do. That, like the sun moves around according to its own cycle, its own temporality. All the gods are doing their works according to their own types of temporalities, their times cycles. But all this is already known by the integral. In other words, the becoming. There is a being that already has the law of the becoming. So the becoming is a knowledge in time and as time of the parts that are already connected in a certain pattern in the real idea of supermind. See? So time and space, that which is becoming and that which is the being, coexist as two faces of the integral. That is the reality that is being talked about. And this is what the Gita is going to point out when Arjuna says to Krishna, that why should I fight this war? Am I not going to incur the sin of killing my relatives? And Krishna says, this war has already been fought. All these people have already been slayed by me. That in a way, everything that we are experiencing is a memory. But it is not a memory in past time. This is Sri Aurobindo makes this point. It's a memory in perpetual time. It's a very paradoxical idea. It's not a memory in past time. It's a supramental memory. In other words, it has happened and it has not happened. It is happening for the very first time. And at the same time, it is unfolding a certain pattern that has always, that is eternal. Its eternity and its perpetuity are two faces of the same thing. So this idea is what is conveyed in the second section. And the second section ends with a very profound, sort of stanza that I will not have time to go into, but it is the one that is number 8. It is he that has gone abroad. So that one which has gone abroad means that has become, that has entered time, that has become the unfoldment in time. But that which has become the unfoldment in time, the diversity and their relations, is without any relations itself. It is the one whose self-relations is the word. That's why in itself, it is bright, bodiless, without scar of imperfection, without sinews, pure, unpierced by evil. But by its self, perception, it is a seer. It sees its own truths. It is a thinker. It works out the laws of this truth. And then it becomes according to that in a world of time. It becomes everywhere. That's why it is always, as it were, in control of all the movements in time. The self-existence has ordered objects perfectly according to their nature from years sempiternal. So from that we go on to this next section, and I need to point out one thing about the next section. The two types of contraries, ignorance and knowledge in the first case, and the non-birth and the birth in the second case. This is the very heart of this Upanishad. Ignorance and knowledge are being referred to by the word Vidya and Avidya. So Vidya and Avidya, uh, what are Vidya and Avidya? So according to Sri Aurobindo, this is again in Life Divine, you'll come across this. Vidya is the law of oneness. Vidya is knowledge by identity. What Vidya means is that you can know anything because you are that thing. So Vidya is the zone without any differentiation. The one is everywhere. It sees itself everywhere. Now, on the other hand, avidya is the zone of differentiation. There are many in it. And because there are many, we put our own consciousness at the center of our experience. And we know the other things in this world only by inference. I can only see you. I don't know how you experience things. So it is only by inference that I know of your existence. So that is the difference between Vidya and Avidya. It is the difference between the one and the many. On the other hand, the birth and the non-birth is the distinction of time, because to be born is to enter time. It's the becoming. And the non-birth is the being. Remember, we started by talking about Purnam. When you take the Purnam from the Purnam, only the Purnam remains. It is never born. In the Gita also, the first thing that Krishna says to Arjuna is, who are you going to kill and who are you going to be killed by? You were never born. So he's pointing to this non-birth, to the fact that there's something in us that remains outside of time, that is outside of the becoming. And the birth is that which has entered the becoming. This Upanishad is therefore telling us we have to find a consciousness in which the being and the becoming, the many and the one, the eternal and the perennial are both experienced at once. It's a paradox to the mind, but this is the truth of supermind. Finally, we come to the fourth section, in which we suddenly get a revelation. There is a lid between the overmind and the supermind. And it is only we don't have any power to break that lid, but it is only by the grace of the supramental sun that we may cross the boundary of that lid. And that is what we see in number 15. The truth of face of truth is covered by a brilliant golden lid. That do thou remove, O fosterer, for the law of truth for sight. So when that is removed, then we actually see, we have the power of seeing and becoming the integral consciousness. And that is what we see everywhere in that case. We see the Lord everywhere in that case. And then it is invoking something deep inside us that actually knows this. What is the source of the memory that can connect us to this? That is what Sri Aurobindo calls the psychic memory. And that's being called will over here. Kratu. Oh, will remember. Krato smara, kritam smara. That which was done, remember. What was done? What was done is the very inception of this idea of becoming that has become the world and all of us. So I think I will end over there. It is a very large and beautiful, deep, profound, and meditative Upanishad that we can hardly do justice to, even in a semester of study. But Sanjeev ji has asked me to talk about it in an hour or 50 minutes. And I hope I've at least been able to introduce you to the profundity of this Upanishad. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Debashish Bhai, for such an illuminating talk. I think it is our first formal verbal and audible encounter with such an important scripture And you've certainly laid out a very useful introduction and foundation to its structure, and given us a real impetus to study it further, especially the way you've divided it into the 4 sections. Um, there are a few questions that have been put, so even you can see them on chat, but I will read them out for everyone. So the first question is, can you explain that translation that you read, the master of life establishes the waters, and also explain the golden lid, which I think you did allude to just towards the end, but the first one especially.
Yeah, that particular stanza in which that occurs, the master of life establishes the waters, is again one of those very, very enigmatic and very concise lines, which remains like a mystery. I mean, unless you have the key to it, it's a total mystery, because it isn't even leading from anywhere. It just suddenly comes in out of nowhere. It begins in a way that one can actually relate to the previous stanza. One unmoving that is swifter than mind, that the gods reach not, for it progresses ever in front. I'll read the Sanskrit. Aneja dekam manaso javiyo, nainad deva apnuvan purvamarshat, tad dhavato anyan atyeti tishtat, tasmin apo matarishva dadhati. One unmoving that is swifter than mind, that the gods reach not, for it progresses ever. This we discussed. This is from the fact that the real idea is already foreseeing the entirety of the becoming. That's why it has already reached the end, while the gods are actually tied by time and are unfolding in a progressive manner that which we are experiencing as the becoming. Now, so that standing passes beyond others as they run. But then it suddenly throws in this, without any warning, this line, in that the master of life establishes the waters. Now, this entire becoming is, in a way, for the experience of life. So one of the major gods in the Veda is Vayu. So this Vayu is going to come back right at the end. Here he's being called Matarishwan. And we'll see a footnote to that in this Upanishad by Sri Aurobindo. He breaks up the word, that's name of the Lord of Life, into that which moves in the mother. Matarishwa, that which moves in the mother. And and then he also says it could be that which moves in matter. See, the life principle inside matter, and the life principle inside the creative energy of the mother. Right. So what is it doing? It's laying down the steps of the progress of the becoming. The becoming is going to take certain steps. Those steps that we know already, only 3 of those steps: matter, life, and mind. But beyond that, there are other steps: the supermind, the Sat, Chit, and Ananda. There are 7 steps. Now, if you are familiar with Sri Aurobindo's symbol, you'll find that at the center of the 2 intersecting triangles, there is a square with 7 waves in it. These are the waters. These waters, each one of these is a principle of consciousness. The word term waters here is a kind of euphemism for consciousness, for levels of consciousness. Establishes the waters. It establishes the rungs of consciousness by which evolution may take place in the becoming.
And the golden lid, I think you mentioned it in terms of...
Yeah, the golden lid. Yeah. The reason why we don't experience what the Isha Upanishad is saying is not for any fault of ours, but because there is a actual kind of hiding, a veiling that is taking place. The Veda is calling it Maya, but this is really a certain kind of lid between the mind and the supermind. So this golden lid is what is being referred to over there, which is not allowing us to see. We need the grace of the divine, of the supermind, to help us transcend this limitation. Because see, all the contradictions we've spoken about, mind, why are we having this problem? Because mind creates distinct realities and sets them up with what is called the law of the excluded middle. If A is true, not A cannot be true. So you don't have any middle. The middle is excluded. See? But to supermind, A and not A are both aspects of truth. And it can see that it has become them. See? So now this division of mind is so that we may have a certain kind of experience. And also we may actually have the fullness of relationality. If everything becomes muddy, we don't know who each other is. So once we can really enjoy our relationality, we can go beyond it as well and still retain it. That is the evolutionary purpose of this lid.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you. So the next statement in question is that Sri Aurobindo's interpretation of Isha Upanishad and its link with supermind is completely novel and in many ways contradictory to the widely prevalent then and even now Shankara's interpretation. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, certainly. Shankara's interpretations of the Upanishads is very interesting. I have a colleague who's actually working on them. Shankara, and Sri Aurobindo has an aphorism I'll refer to very soon. But Shankara, it's a kind of a circular argument, because in a way he's saying what I'm saying is given support by the Upanishads, because that's his entire philosophy is Vedantic, because he's saying I'm saying what the Upanishads say, right? So he's supporting himself by the Upanishad, and he's trying to interpret the Upanishad. So it's what might be called a circular argument. So what he does is he very conveniently just ignores entire parts which are inconvenient, and so he makes it look like this is all a certain kind of a Advaitic interpretation. But Sri Aurobindo has a very funny aphorism. He says, God laughed at Shankara 3 times, and one of them was when, he went and cremated his mother. There are three instances. I'm forgetting the second one. But the third one, he said, when he wrote his interpretation of the Isha Upanishad.
That's very interesting that he himself had to say something like that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Would it be appropriate to infer that Sri Aurobindo's vision of integral yoga to supermanhood was embedded in the Veda and the Vedantic literature, especially Isha Upanishad?
Absolutely. The one thing that I'd say that Sri Aurobindo introduces, which the Upanishad doesn't have to that extent, is the whole idea of evolution. As I said, if we take that line that one of your viewers has very perceptively, identified, that has to do with the waters, we can say that the idea of the evolution was there, but it's very mystic. It's extremely hidden. But Sri Aurobindo points out that this is the very meaning. This evolution is the very meaning of the becoming, leading to supermind as a kind of a cosmic goal, and also that now is the time for it. See that this is the time for that golden lid to be broken. And if we are to believe Sri Aurobindo and the mother, this is exactly what the mother did on 29th February 1956, when if you read her description of the event, the spiritual event that occurred at the playground on that day, she broke the golden lid with a golden hammer. This is exactly what happened.
Wonderful. Thank you. Um, I have one more question. So again, we've been asked to explain the last sentence where it says, to the completest speech of submission, we should dispose. Uh,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, I'm coming to that. So this is the last. So that the fourth section, we didn't have time to really go into it. So there, the fourth section, it. So there are three gods that are invoked in this last section. The beginning is to the sun god. Okay, O foster, O solcio, O illumining sun, O power of the Father. All that is that first 16th stanza is referring to the sun god, the supramental uh, deity. The 17th is invoking the power of life, the life god, breath of things, Vayu. And the last one that was just referred to is invoking the power of fire or Agni. Now, these three gods, the sun god, the wind god, and the fire god, are the three most important gods of the Veda. And they relate to the solar presence in the three worlds. In the supramental world, which also becomes the presiding deity of the heaven world, then the world of life, so that world, the world of supermind and the world of mind are controlled by the sun. The world of life is controlled by the wind god, Vayu, and the world of matter, earth, is controlled by fire, because fire is the sun that has descended to the earth. So fire, that's fire in the Veda, is the priest of the sacrifice. So fire is being invoked as the psychic energy inside us that is already the knower. It's called Agni Jata Veda, the knower of births, knowing all things that are manifested. The supermind resides as a memory inside us individually. That's why that power inside us is being invoked. Lead us by the good path to the felicity. Remove from us the devious attraction of sin. So this connects back to cleave not to any man's, agree not, lust not after any man's possession. So that kind of anxiety which makes us grab at things is goes away once that's why in Sri Aurobindo's yoga, the coming to the front of the psychic is the decisive step that allows a certain kind of what's called the sunlit path. That's the good path to the felicity. That's the sunlit path. And that particular way of life is the way of surrender to the divine. That's why that entire thing ends with the line, to thee completest speech of submission we would dispose. That's the total surrender, the divine return sacrifice that is being talked about. Psychic surrender.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a wonderful explanation. And we'll focus on that when we come to study it in more detail. And my final question is, at the very outset, when you said that when Sri Aurobindo was commenting on this, he had mentioned the word life divine related to Isha Upanishad. Is there an Isha Upanishad influence on Savitri? Is there a very evident influence that we can see in Savitri?
I think there is. I think the Isha Upanishad's influence is pervading all Sri Aurobindo's works. In Savitri also it is there. There are many passages that actually have the stamp of even the kind of language of the Isha Upanishad. But this idea of knowing the two as one, as he says, is very much there even in Savitri. I want to, yeah, actually that what you have asked would be another quite a deep study one can make of exactly where this kind of influence comes in Savitri. Um, I have not thought about that to that extent, but I can immediately see that yes, it is certainly present in Savitri as well.
So we are probably lining up another talk on this Isha Upanishad and Savitri. Thank you. I think
I
before,
just before in passing, since we've covered it so many different directions,
yes,
I mentioned one thing. I mentioned the use of the word vijnana, and I said that it does not actually occur in this Upanishad, but it occurs in a modified form. So I wanted to just draw attention to that in passing, where it occurs. So you find that in this, I think it's the eighth stanza, where he's going to say, um, no, the seventh stanza, right? So the Sanskrit goes, Yasmin sarvani bhutani atme vabhut vijanatah tatra ko moha ka shoka ekatvam anupashyatah. So this term vijanatah is used there. Yasmin sarvani bhutani atmai vabhut vijanatah. Now he will translate, he in whom it is the self being that has become abhut, that has become all existences that are becomings. See, this become existences that are becomings, that the temporality is coming in. For he has the perfect knowledge, that is Vijanatah. So Vijanatah is the knowledge of the becoming. See this, the distinction is made even in the Gita between Jnana and Vijnana. So Vijanatah is, and Sri Aurobindo will point this out in his commentary, that the knowledge of the becoming, how did the being become the becoming, that is Vijnana. And that if we don't have that, we can go into Vidya and lose the Avidya. So to know both as once, we need to have this Vijnana, which is the knowledge of how that one becomes the many and its unfoldment in time.